Hello and welcome back to M.M.S.P. Today I'm doing a book review of a book that I read over this semester. It's Rogues, which is a short story collection, anthology, I don't know. It's edited by George R. R. Martin and this other person, Gardner Dozois. Dozois? I don't know. Um, Either way, it is comprised of 21 short stories, and I thought I would run through which ones are worth reading, which ones are not worth reading. I am going to go into spoilers. If you do not want spoilers, skip to the end of the video. I've got a rundown of my rating for each short story and the overall rating for the book, so that way you know which ones to read, which ones not to read, if the book is worth your time. Um, you know, it's a book that's held together under the idea of the rogue. Like the rapscallion, the liar, the thief, but like in an endearing way. I'm sure you know what a rogue is, a rapscallion of some sort. And different writers interpreted this in different ways. I've got some ambient page turning to get us in the mood here. Um, and so I'll get into it as we start. I've prepared this PowerPoint presentation in an hour, and I'm going to be working mostly off memory and what notes I have. So let's get started. So we're going to start with Tough Times All Over by Joe Abercrombie. On the left, I have some of their previous work, and on the right, I've got kind of the general feel for the short story that I got put into picture form. Isn't the internet crazy? So, at the left, I actually read these three books over the summer. It is The Blade Itself, Before They Are Hanged, and The Last Argument of Kings. It's not a cheerful series. Joe Abercrombie is a bit of a heavy writer. And that's what I'll say about him. And on the right, I've got, it's kind of like, it's set in a place called Sepani, which is in his world for this Blade Itself trilogy and his later trilogy and the books in between that he's written. So this is kind of his world, set in that same world. I do not think you need to know or have read those books to enjoy this one. You'll enjoy it the same either way, and I'll get into that. And the first reason is there's a rotating cast of characters. So it's about a package that gets passed and stolen and like taken and given to a bunch of different people. And each of them, once they receive this package, you get to see from their perspective the rest of the story for these next few pages, which they have the package. And I think that's very cool. And Joe Abercrombie, if there's one thing this man can do, it's write characters. His prose is not fantastic, but man, or not great, but not fantastic. It's middling, but man, can he write interesting characters. And it's intriguing for both people familiar with the books and people who aren't, for different reasons. The main reason is there's like a big name drop. So if you don't know who this character is, it builds a lot of intrigue as to who could it be, because Joe Abercrombie does a lot, very good work setting up this character to be like an imposing figure in his own right inside the short story. So you're like, oh, I wonder who this could be. And if you are a reader of his books, you know exactly who it is off the description. You're like, oh, what could this person want with this package? That's clearly an important package then. And overall, I'll give it 3.5 stars. My basis is 3 is like the average quality I would expect from buying a book of short stories. That's like the average quality. So this is an above average short story. I think mostly because of the strength that Joe Abercrombie has with writing different characters. They're all unique characters. There's a girl who has the package originally. It's stolen by like a poor guy who used to be a very good fencer, and he's in crippling poverty, and then it's confiscated by a debt collector, and then who doesn't really feel emotion, and then it's given to like a mob boss who then has it stolen. It's a whole thing, but they're all very unique perspectives, and they think in very different ways, and they have internal dialogues in very different ways. So that's what elevates this above, to me, an average short story. Next is What Do You Do by Gillian Flynn. I had not read any Gillian Flynn before this. She's written Gone Girl, so not a small author by any means. Um, so I'm sure a lot of people have heard of her. In this one, uh, this her main character has a very unique perspective. She starts off as a, I'm not going to say prostitute, but somebody who does sexual favors, and then she transitions into fortune telling as kind of like a side hustle. And I don't know how many I certainly haven't read any stories with that unique perspective. Um, it was very interesting. This is clearly a con woman, but it's written in like an endearing, intriguing. You can understand why she does it, how she got in that position, why she makes the decisions she makes, and she's smart. So she's not making dumb decisions. So you're like on board with this character. There's also like this story has like a bazillion twists, 10 quadsquillion twists, and all of them are unique and earned and excellent and make sense. Especially once you finish the short story, it makes sense. Um, and I'll get into that. Her writing, her prose feels so natural. Like it makes me excited to read some of her later work, like Gone Girl, because it felt to me like I was listening to somebody think or to recite a story. It was, natural is the best way I can put it. And then every character has a unique perspective. They all feel believable and real. Not just the main character's unique perspective, but there's a bunch of like different people. Like there's a kid. Um, so the main con woman gets tangled up in kind of like trying to demystify, detoxify, decurse a house from a rich woman, and because her son is acting wacky, and at first she's like, okay, well, clearly the son's just having issues with the mom, and it'll sort itself out. But the kid is like legit creepy, and there's bloodstains on the wall, which she's like, that's probably not bloodstains, but it might be. And then characters act later when a bunch of the twists occur. Characters act in such a way that once everything is revealed, you're like, yes, they would act like this in this scenario. Yes, that twist does make sense because this, that, and the other. It's it's thrilling, and the whole thing is like edge of your seat stuff. Like edge of your seat stuff. It's tense. It's exhilarating. It's not that light. It's a short story. It's fantastic. Read this, please. I'm not going to spoil too much, even though I said it was supposed. It's 5 stars. This is a must read. The Inn of the Seven Blessings, by Garth Nix. Forgot to write his name. I mean, he's written some stuff. I haven't read any of his stuff. And on the right, that is a cannibal from Bone Tomahawk. That's kind of what the cannibal tribe reminded me of in this one. So to start off, the interesting cannibal tribe. This cannibal tribe, within the first few pages, is established to have like a certain culture and a certain goings on, and they're immediately interesting. You're immediately invested in this weird cannibal tribe and the politics that go on with this. And like a wizard created them, uh, and then they kind of killed the wizard. They turned on the wizard, and now they kind of live on their own. But they've made like a pact with the villagers to only like hunt people in certain areas. It's interesting stuff. The cannibals group is the most interesting part of this entire story. The characters less so. Main character, he feels like a device through which the plot happens. A more interesting character is like the little godlet he gets. He gets like a little godlet, and through that godlet, he has to save his previous owner, and he also ends up saving a woman, and then they're gonna take this godlet to some other place to free him. And then it turns out that, oh, they've been betrayed. Him and this woman he saved because he wanted to, I suppose. And she was there. And they're betrayed. And then they kick his ass, pretty much. They find out he betrayed him. And then they kick his ass and feed him to the cannibals. And then they go to the wizard, and oh, the wizard isn't actually gonna free him. He's gonna use him to like superpower himself, along with a bunch of 6 other little godlets. Remind me very much of Terry Pratchett's Small Gods in that way, that they're little godlets. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's serviceable. The characters acting, and I mean, about how you'd expect. It's nothing out of this world. The prose is fine. I mean, the ending is fine. They free the godlets, and the godlets bestow 7 blessings on them, but they're only minor blessings because they're minor gods. Like, hey, you're a little sexier, and you'll win horse races on Tuesdays and whatnot. So, and then they build an inn by a crossroads because there's like a crossroads one. So, I mean, it's fine. It's all right. It's 3 stars. It's fine. It wasn't a bad story. It wasn't a good one. The Cannibal Group was very interesting. Bent Twig by Joe R. Lansdale. This is one in the Hap and Leonard series. I don't think you need to have read previous Hap and Leonard. I certainly haven't to enjoy this. It's 2 established characters. It's in an established world. It's part of a series. The plot sucks. I'm gonna be honest with you. The plot sucks. They have to rescue his wife, girlfriend. I can't remember. His partner, the main character's, I think Hap. I think Hap. One of the main characters, wife's son, or no, daughter, who makes bad decisions all the time, and she's a druggie, and they're always saving her. She's like always selling her body and like buying drugs, and she's a, I don't want to say like terminal victim, but like bad things are always happening to this woman. So immediately the story starts. It's like, oh, she's in trouble again. So you're like, okay. I mean, she's been in trouble before, and the main character isn't even psyched to do this. He's like, fine, I guess I love my wife. I'll go save this woman again. Nothing of consequence happens. You know this is from a greater series. You know this is going to be a side thing. I mean, they're not going to kill off her daughter in like a side story. There's a lack of stakes. You know nothing's going to happen. You know she's going to be fine. You know they're going to save her. And everything else is going through the motions. The villain group is just evil for the sake of it. Yeah, we sold this woman to be our sex slave because we're nefarious. Wow. Okay. Thrilling, hey? This was a bad story. This was one of the bad ones. It made me wonder why I was reading it a few times. I'd start reading. I'd read like 10 pages, and I'd look up and I'd go, why am I not skipping this? I didn't skip it because I wanted to read through the whole thing in case a story got good at the end, which sometimes did happen. I'll give you an example later, where everything ties in. This is not one of those times. They save the girl, and he gets to sleep with his wife. Cool. Isn't that intriguing? And his friend Leonard comes in and kills a few people. So it's a reunion. It's a team-up reunion. They were separated for 10 pages. 20 maybe. It was bad. It was bad. 1 star. Tawny Petticoats by Michael Swanwick. This is from his series. I think he wrote 2 books in this series, maybe 1. The Dog Said Bow Wow. And it reminded me of one of my favorite albums, Traveler by the Lord Weird Slough. And that's mainly because there's a dog person. There are there's dog people. I'm gonna stumble through that word. It's 1 a.m. Cut me some slack. Fuck! Hold on. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked. Anthropomorphic. Yes. Anthropomorphic. Yes, got it. Okay, anthropomorphic people, animal dog people. There's gorillas. One of our main characters is a dog. So that's why it reminded me of that. I got sidetracked. The characters are unique. One person's a dog person, one person's a human, and then they hire a really entrepreneurial young rogue, and it's revealed that this is all part of the plan because they're looking for a woman with a birthmark, whatever, in her nether regions that looks a certain way, or like a tattoo that's a certain way. And then they're looking, and then they've got a big lineup of women just showing them their nether regions. Haha, very clever them. So it characterizes them in that way, but it also sheds further characterization because they were specifically looking, and the woman did this for somebody who drew it on, like very well. So it shows that this person is willing to do stuff to get into like a job. It's like a criminal job. So then they've got this whole scheme they hatch to try to steal gold, or I think it's silver, from like the mayor of this evil city. I think it's San Francisco in the future, which is run by like the mayor, and he's like a pirate, and there's like zombie slaves. And these zombies are like mindless, and the mind has been shoved down through like a special serum, and this is how they pay off their debts, which is a little dystopian and cool. It's a very good excuse to have zombies, like a zombie workforce, and so immediately there's stakes. I mean, like I know I said before that in the other story you didn't feel like you had stakes because you knew it was part of a series. This one makes you suspend that. Like, there's a suspension of disbelief there. The setting is excellent. It like the San Francisco is vivid, or whatever that is, San Diego. I don't know. It's some sand in the U.S. with the zombies and all these different things, and they can like be woken up by salt. The whole thing is excellent. It's well put together. The prose is above average. It's nothing special. But it's pretty good for what it is, and the ending is very fitting. The main characters get duped. They get had, which is refreshing. It's very, very refreshing. They get had, and then saved later by the other characters in a way that they like track receipts, and they're like, oh, he hasn't been here for a while. Probably something bad happened. So we're gonna go where like the zombie place. He gets turned into a zombie for a while and has to work the fields, and you get the zombie perspective of what that's like. So immediately you're getting like unique perspectives from the different characters and like in the world, and then they save him, and then he uses that opportunity to save the rest by it's salt, I believe, very effectively too. So it shows that the characters are thinking, and then they get duped again by their partner, the woman, who steals from them and goes off to marry a guy who it was shown that she was into earlier. Very roguelike. So it's interesting because the author is playing with the idea of this rogues like book, because you think the two main characters are the rogues, like how dastardly, right? But they get duped by the actual quote-unquote rogue, who's the woman they hired, and she steals from them, but not everything, because she's not, she's not evil, she's not that complete asshole, so she leaves a little bit for them, so they still come out with a profit, but not as much. I liked it a lot. I was not expecting to like it as much as I did. 4 to 5. Provenance by David W. Ball. He's written Empires of Sand. Never read it. On the right, I have what I got when I searched up historian, because this story feels like a historical piece. A lot of it is set in World War II with the Nazis, so that's already not a fun time. But it follows different characters, and you don't know where So for large portions of this, it feels disconnected. You're like, okay, you start with a person in a writing room, and he gets news of like a certain painting, and he's like, "Ooh, a painting!" He's very excited about this painting. You have no idea why. Um, and then he goes there, and it goes completely into this whole World War II thing, and there's a bunch of different shifting perspectives. Um, and then it ends with a fantastic twist. Like it starts with the guy very excited about painting. It goes into World War II for a while, and a bunch of different characters in there, and like a painting store. And then, what happens to this big bad Nazi man who eventually, I think he gets beaten to death or shot. Um, and then at the end, there's this fantastic twist that really wraps everything together. And that's why I keep reading, because at the start I was like, okay, well, this is disjointed and not very good. And I mean, it's like the ending is near perfect. But it did feel dry at points, right? So I was like, nah, it's fine, like 2.5 stars maybe. The ending pulled this thing together. Like 3.5 stars. It like, shoo, pulled everything together. It still doesn't excuse the fact it can feel dry at points, and that it can just feel like disjointed. But the ending really wraps it. So that's why I read through all of them. After this, I was like committed. I'm reading through every short story right to the end because this is fantastic. I'm not spoiling the ending of this one either. Roaring Twenties by Carrie Vaughn. She's written some other stuff. Haven't written any of her work. This might be from a series. I honestly couldn't tell, and I forget. Great preparation, I know. And then on the right, it's Witch, because the main characters are witches. But there's two witches. And the main witch, whose perspective we see, the point of view character, she feels like a side character. She does really nothing through the whole story but talk about other things that the other main character has done. She does one thing in the story, which is redirect some guy who's like snooping around to go get distracted or like lulled in, and that's really all she does in the entire short story of note, from what I remember. It's just not good. It's the protagonists felt invincible. Like they're hyped up, and it doesn't help how much she hypes up the other main character in this book. Every third sentence of dialogue is how good the other main character is. I could be misremembering, but to me it felt like that. It felt like these characters could do no wrong. At no point in this story do the characters get duped. Like, oh no, they get caught with their pants down a little bit, but they're perfectly prepared for that too, I suppose. It's fine. The prose is bad. The writing's bad. It felt like childish writing a little bit. It's below average prose. The premise was interesting. It's set in like the 20s, hence Roaring Twenties, and there's two witches, and they go to a club, like a pub, and there's a guy. The two witches, the main witch, not the perspective character. I'm gonna call her the side witch. The main witch is like, oh, I'm gonna talk to this woman, and then she does at the end of the night, but not before two other people come ask them for help getting out of a mob, essentially, and then they help them, sort of off screen, and the side witch, does a little bit of distracting again. Like it's wow. She's like the human version of like a firecracker going off. That's it. Oh, not good. But and then it gets raided by normal people, non-magical people, because there's like magical people like horns and whatnot that find refuge in like this hidden, invisible bar, and then they do a raid, but then they get dunked on a little bit. And then I think they find him afterwards, and something or other happens to him. I think he gets dunked on again. So it's an interesting idea, like a human raid on a fantasy thing, and these people are caught in a crossfire. But the whole thing is just done bad. Like, it's 1.5 stars. I've read worse. But, not worth your time. A Year and a Day in Old Theradane by Scott Lynch. He's known for the Gentleman Bastard series. 3 books have released. I've read all 3, so already you know I like this author. And on the right, there's a bridge, which is interesting. It'll come in later. So the setting is fantastic. Like, it's set in a world where there are wizards fighting against each other. Kind of like, ooh, it's like the daimyo, kind of, in Japan. But instead of having domains they rule over, they're just kind of all fighting. They've got, like, their own little house. I guess their houses are their domains. And then they're just fighting, and everyone else is caught in the crossfire. They're, like, described like, uh, golden rain or like rainbow rain, and the sky lit up purple and orange, and then a bunch of creatures come crashing right onto their poker table while they're playing fantasy poker. Wham! Because they're just, creatures that the other people used to fight with each other. That's already fantastic. So they set up these massive wizards warring. And then you've got a colorful cast of characters with interesting histories. Like, these are retired thieves. It's a band of retired thieves, and you hear about their exploits, and you even see, like, bring in the interesting histories. You see that one of their people fucked up. Like, they were out, and then he got into trouble, and the wizards, it's like there's like a big council of wizards. This big council of wizards in charge of the city, Theradane, they take his soul. They took a soul from him and use it to charge the lamps on a bridge, and that's the punishment for doing enough bad things. So, hey, already there's stakes. Well, it's a one shot. There's no other story. One of these characters is dead right off the bat, and they feel guilty about it. Like, the main heroine, she like has a conversation in her head with this bridge. She feels so guilty about it. And one of the characters is a robot who the robots have the right to own themselves, which is very interesting. Or own their head, sorry, which is very interesting. So while he was being forced to do robot stuff, which is not what he wanted to do, I would also not want to do robot stuff. Although robots seem to really like doing human stuff, so that's not great, especially art and writing. More recently, he built his own body, and then he transplanted his head onto his body, and then he just got out. He basically made his own freedom, which is a very unique idea. And then we've got like a wizard bartender who does like very fancy drinks. Like how drinks here sometimes, we've set the tequila on fire and you gotta drink like a on fire drink. But this one, it's like, we've created like a world inside this glass, and you drink through different layers of time and whatnot. It's very interesting. And like these characters work as a unit. There's a big problem. Main girl gets very drunk, very mad that this monster landed on the poker table. She's gonna go have a word with one of the big evil wizards. Horrible idea, but she's hammered. We've all been there. She goes, she gets way in over her head. The wizard is like, alright, I have so much dirt on you, you're like under parole, basically. Because they've done bad things, but they like bought their freedom, I suppose. Yeah, I think they bought their freedom. But they're on parole. So she's like, I've got you saying things here that would violate your parole, and you would also be a street lamp unless you help me take out another wizard. So, and then, like, to help take out this other wizard, I'll get into that, the whole, like, cast of characters uses their unique skills to help tackle this problem. Like, they've got their own wizard who can, like, do wizard things. And she catches, like, a listening device that the big evil wizard used. She's, like, a minor wizard. She finds a tracking device, or, like, a listening device. So they take that out, and they plant it somewhere else, so that the evil wizard can't listen. The writing is great. It's Scott Lynch. The writing is fantastic. The way his characters interact, the dialogue in Scott Lynch's books is always 10 out of 10. And the main idea is very interesting. So there's witch, or wizard, she's a woman, but she wants them to find that each wizard or witch has a source of power, essentially. like a place or a thing that is a source of power. And if you destroy that, their power weakens substantially. Like they become pathetic. And then so she could take over this other wizard's territory, which she was fighting over, which caused the big monster to fall on the table. And it turns out that upon learning where it is, I think she already knew, it's just a street. It's just they have to steal a street, which is, you know, how would you steal a street? And they try everything. They try changing the name of the street and changing the documents, like, one of the first things you would think of. They try blocking off the street and have, like, quote unquote stealing the street for a few hours. None of that works. And it got me thinking, how would I solve this problem? And it, like, all the solutions I came up with, like renaming the street, steal the signs, put new signs in, that's one I thought of. They try it, and it doesn't work. I'm not going to spoil the ending to this, but it's smart. It's very smart, and it's set up in universe how they could do it. And what I like a lot about it is you see the characters fail through a bunch of different attempts. And they try to be lazy first. Like, they try the easy ones, right? Block off the street. Change the name of the street. They try the easy ones. Everything you would think of. And you see them fail. They're not invincible. You see them fail through this. And it gets down to the wire. They have a year and a day to do this. Down to the wire. I'm not going to... It's fantastic. In the ending, it closes everything off. It wraps up the story, not in the way you'd expect, but it wraps up everything, and then it sets up further stories that are probably not going to happen. But it doesn't have to, because you can in your head, play out the following events. It's excellent. These are excellent stories. 5 out of 5, must read. Bad Brass by Bradley Denton. He's written some other stuff, haven't read it. It's about instruments. I forget what it's called. I think it's called like a somaphone. I pictured it as a tuba, so it's a tuba in my book, or like a baritone. The plot's fine. There's a person who wants to buy a somaphone. I'm just gonna call it a tuba, or sosaphone. I'm gonna call it a tuba. He wants to buy a tuba from some kids who are stealing tubas from their normal elementary school. It's believable, it's plausible, you could see it happening. But that's pretty much, the extent of it. There's no twists, there's no turns, it plays out. The protagonist is interesting, right? He's like a teacher, and he loves his ex-wife, and he moves there, but he doesn't like her enough to fight for her, and he's embarrassed by her, but he still wants to be near her, and he's a good guy because he's trying to do the good thing, and he likes the kids he's with, like teaching, but also he robs them, or like the ones he doesn't like. So, but he looks out for the ones he does like. So there's interesting, and the side characters are strong. There's the guy that his ex-wife is now dating. Our main character sets him up to be an asshole. So you'd think, oh, he's an asshole. But no. He's just an unreliable narrator. Turns out he's actually a pretty cool guy. The prose is fine. Nothing outstanding there. The main issue with it is how long it is. I think it's like 65, 70 pages. That's too long. That's like 15 pages longer than anything else in the book. 60 to 70 pages. It's too long. So, 3 stars. It's too long. Cut this down 20 pages, I think it scores higher. I'm not sure it busts out of the 3 into 3.5, but it would be at least a much stronger 3. Heavy Metal by Cherry Priest. And that Jesus is not there for her name. She's written other things, I suppose. The protagonist is named Kilgore Jones, and that pretty much sets the tone for the rest of the story. He's described as like 6.5 foot and bald, and wears like a biker vest. And his name is Kilgore. And his name is Kilgore Jones. I wrote more points, but honestly, I debated just leaving it at that and calling it, because that's about what you need to know going into the story, in my opinion. there's like a creature he has to fight, which is like it takes the form of a miner who died in the mines, which is cool. It's a cool idea, but it's Deus Ex Jesus. He's getting his ass, or he would get his ass kicked, but he like calls upon Jesus and he shows up as like a big stag, glowing stag, and just takes care of the situation, which makes you wonder, like, I mean, why? You know? Why? Kilgore Jones shows up to town. They go, hey, there's a monster here. He asks questions about the monster, and he farts around in town for a while. Then he goes to fight the monster. They describe him like having a standoff with this thing, and then he just calls Jesus, and he wins. Or God, or whatnot. It is a stag. Why even... He could just get to town, go, hey, you got a monster? Where? They point him to the monster, and then he goes and finishes it. This story could be like a quarter as long, and still the same interest. It was... I mean... It was bad. 1.5 stars. It was bad. The writing wasn't terrible. The creature was interesting. But I mean... Kilgore Jones. The Meaning of Love by Daniel Abraham. This was a big surprise for me. Because usually I hate romance stories. Like, I don't like them. When I see them on screen, like on cinema, or I read them in books, I don't care. Really at all. For romantic subplots. If they were removed from everything forever, I'm not sure I would mind. Like, sure, sometimes it's done well, but for the most part, I do not care for them in the slightest. But this one very pleasantly surprised me. The setting, first off, I knew it was going to be at least decent once I heard the setting description. It's a city that is, because of a technical, legal loophole, which is described in pretty good detail. Not too long. It's like page, maybe. Page and a half. Is its own sovereign part. There's like a few, like, 100 square kilometers that is its own sovereign city. And so the people, like a bunch of different runaways from other cities, use it as a hideout. And then the more people come, the taller they have to build. So they build buildings upon buildings upon buildings, and they use, like, rope to go across, and bridges, and the bridges always collapse because they're always shoddily built, because there's really no GDP going on here. What do they have to export? What trade do they have? They're like a city within a city. They got nothing. So the whole thing is built super shoddily, and they get wood, like, from the riverbank. They're next to a river, and they just take wood, and they use that to build their houses. It's very interesting, the way the setting is described. And, like, they explore the idea of love at several levels. Like, there's two main characters. Asa, I believe, is one of the main characters, and then a prince who's on the run, and that's why he's here. And Asa loves the prince. And Asa also loves her city. Like, all different parts of the city. And they explore these two different loves. I'm not going to say in depth, but they definitely explore them, and I like how they did it a lot. And also how this prince, he falls in love with a girl he saw once. And he tasks Asa to go save her because she's being sold into, like, a work boat, or like a work camp. So Asa has to go save the woman the woman that the love of her life loves. Is that good? She's fucking herself over, but should she go save this? But, you know, she's fucking up her chances with him. But also she's, like, saving somebody who means a lot to the love of her life. So there's already a moral dilemma there. It's cool. There's cool ambiguity and nuance with the lead character. Asa is left ambiguously neither male or female. And there gets to a point where Asa has, like, I'm gonna spoil a little bit of it. It's still completely worth reading, even if I spoil it for you. It's not a massive twist. It's about the journey, not the destination with this book, or this short story. But she saves the woman that her guy loves, and then sleeps with her. But it's very they leave it very vague as to whether Asa's a man or woman, because they never describe Asa's physical appearance. Asa's could go either way as a name, and all she said, or all Asa says, is you're not gonna like you're when she's like disrobing, is you're gonna be surprised by what you see, and then the woman's like, okay, that's fine, and then they make love. So you can project either Asa's a man or a woman onto that, and that's fine. And Asa sleeps with this woman who wants to sleep with him. He just worked really hard, or she just worked really hard. They just worked really hard, like busted their ass. This woman wants to sleep with them. No one has to know. The woman certainly won't tell the prince. And the Asa's working for free, so there's nuance there. Technically, it's a bit of a dick move, right? But also you can see the rationale for it. Not a fantastic move, and then Asa at the end comes to terms with, maybe I'm a bad person, but at the same time, Asa just saved this woman, and the prince leaves. If you love him, let him free. The prince leaves, and then Asa discovers their love for the city as a whole, more so than the person. You can interpret it a bunch of different ways. I interpret it as Asa loves the city, and they had a fascination with this person, this prince, and the city goes above all. That's how I interpreted it. And so love is not only like a thing you do to a person, but you can also fall in love with a place, or like a lifestyle, which I think is very interesting, and a unique spin. I loved this story. I thought it was fantastic. 4.5 stars. The only thing that holds it back a little bit is the prose, but 4.5, it's fantastic. It's not even bad prose, it's just not stellar. A Better Way to Die by Paul Cornell. He's written other things, and this story reminded me a little bit about Gemini Man. Have I seen Gemini Man? No, but I have seen a trailer or two, so that's probably enough. The setting is cool, but it requires thinking when it comes to sci-fi terms. I'd not to the same extent, but I had a similar experience as to when I first read Dune. And Dune has like a little glossary at the back where you can look up all the funny sci-fi words and see what they mean and see what they all are. I didn't know that, because why would I ever look in the back of the book when I start reading a book? They don't tell you there's a glossary at the back. That seems like information that should probably go in the front, or at least a little. Anyway, so I had a very similar experience where it's like you get a sci-fi term, and then through context clues you have to puzzle out what this sci-fi term means. My big problem with it is by the time I amassed enough context clues to form like a concrete understanding of what was going on, the story was nearly over. So I understood everything by the end, for the end, but like by the skin of my teeth. And then I had to think back in retrospect. Okay, this makes sense because this. This is cool because this. Maybe they need a glossary. Maybe it's a sci-fi thing. I don't know. So it's a cool setting. There's clones from other worlds, and they're taking these clones and they're implanting they're seeing which clone's better. The clone in the prime quote unquote world, who are fighting against like an alien force, or a clone in the other world, which one's better? And then sometimes they implant the brain and the memories of the prime clone into the other clones, so they have a younger, fresher body from a different multiverse, which is very interesting. So the setting is very cool. It's like in Britain, and so our main character sees at like this big party event for the company he works for, or I think he works for the government. Either way, for the entity he works for, I believe it's a government. He sees a version of his younger self, and so he's like, "Whoa, Is this a test? Are they trying to see which one of us is better? Like this younger version of me? Am I too old and cynical and decrepit and stuck in my ways? Am I being replaced by this young kid? Or is the young kid brought here so I can get my mind put in him? So they have a poker game, which is intriguing because you can see like the young kid get frustrated and the old guy, or the prime version, using what he knows are traits of his to his advantage, or were traits of his. And it's a unique card game. It completely made up for this world. I've got poker game in quotes because that's not essentially what it is, but comparable, I think. And it sets up the ending because at the ending these two guys do fight, um, and you see not a similar thing take place, but kind of the young kid use his own habits, which which the prime version still isn't shaken, to his advantage, and because he gets the jump on him, and then they're like kind of thinking, what would I do? The fight becomes very even. What would I do in this scenario and why? It's a very cerebral fight right at the end. So the poker game sets up perfectly for that, and the ending is unexpected. I'm not going to spoil it because I think it's worth reading. It's unexpected, but it's within character. The first starting lines of the character, like when you're first introduced to him, have kind of a big impact, I think, on how you view the ending. But I'm going to leave it at that. The character acts within character for the ending, which is neat. But I did find it a little hard to keep track of everything, like I said. The different prime, not prime versions of people that occurred. The funny sci-fi terms, mostly. They're like hopping between worlds at one point, like different multiverses. So I was having trouble figuring out which multiverse they were in, if they were in the same multiverse at the same time. It was a little tricky. I'd recommend taking it slow with this one, but still pretty good. 3.5 out of 5. Ill Seen Entire by Steven Saylor. He's written a bunch in the series as like a side quest for his characters, very little side story. And I've put The Invisible Man there, for reasons I'll get into. Excellent movie, by the way. You should watch that movie. Excellent. The two leads, there's like this young guy whose name starts with a G, and he's like a Roman detective in the later books, but this is like takes place when he's still a kid, so he's still learning the ways of Rome. And apparently this author is very good at describing Rome in detail and ancient Rome in detail, but you do not get a lot of that in this book, which is unfortunate. But he has a tutor with him who's like helping him teaching him things. What I liked about it though is this tutor is not just a exposition fountain like he very easily could have been, and very nearly was. He exposition dumps through his point of view, if that makes sense. So when he's telling a story or telling background or talking about a thing, he's saying it not as the author would say it, but as this character would say it. And they had the two main characters have like a back and forth banter going on, a fun dynamic. I like that. That's definitely the highlight. The main problem is the story is so damn predictable. As soon as I knew what was going on, I kid you not, I predicted the story beat for beat. Beat for beat, I predicted the story. I didn't even have to read the last like 15 pages of this book or story, maybe even 20. It was so predictable. Maybe if I didn't see it coming more, I'd have seen it. But they turn invisible, and everything you would expect from an old guy and a young kid who turn invisible in a tavern happens. It's, and then there's a twist at the end. Oh, they weren't actually invisible. The guy who sold them the invisibility potion, pretty much, or like the scripture that tells you how to make an invisibility potion, he was lying, and he paid off everyone else to pretend like they were invisible, and then they he racked in the big money from what the tutor paid him. So predictable, beat for beat, predicted the whole story. 2.5 stars, below average. If it wasn't for that fun dynamic between the first two, or between the two main characters, this could easily be down to 1.5 stars, like down a whole star. But I liked their banter. I looked forward to when the two leads talked, so that salvages it somewhat. A Cargo of Ivory by Garth Nix. Fuck, was the other one not Garth Nix? Who was the other one? Hold on, hold on. M.M.S.P Blessings by Matthew Hughes. Is that the one I missed? Yeah, I think that's the one I missed. Yeah. Matthew Hughes wrote M.M.S.P Blessings. Garth Nix is Cargo of Ivories. I apologize. That's my bad. He's written other things with these same characters. You do not need to have read the other things. I think he does a very good job of explaining who's what and what's going on. And on the right is a D&D boat fight, which, I'll get into. It felt like a Dungeons & Dragons game. Like, if I was to run a D&D game with this premise, I think it would play out very similar. Like, with interactions, maybe a few goofy things by the players, or in this case, the two protagonists, one of whom is a knight and one of whom is a 1,000-year-old puppet. Does that come up? No, because he makes like the same decisions that the other guy does. He doesn't have like amazing knowledge. He's just a guy who's a puppet. So it felt like a D&D game. There's a thief character who's introduced. She's pretty cool. She lies, but you don't know she's lying. But it later, turns out that she was lying about several things. And I just like her character a lot. At one point, she attempts to double cross the main trio, and it doesn't work, and it's funny. And you get it, right? Because you're with this character for a certain bit of time, and you start thinking she's competent. Like, she says she's this great thief, and then it slowly turns out she's not that good of a thief. And then there's a big revelation. Oh, she wasn't actually here to steal things. She was here to steal this certain thing because she worships this guy, this god. Again, it's a godlit kind of situation, like the end of Seven Blessings. Pretty much exactly. Except they're in a cargo of ivories. And they're like, okay, you can have the ivories if you give us these godlet ivories. And she's like, okay, cool. But actually, she was looking out for this specific ivory. And she tries to backstab them and get away. But it's already established. Like, she's too much of a wimp to go fight the big evil guy. And she's not a very good thief. The main characters, get the better of her the first time, too. So, it's set up that she's gonna fail the double cross, but you're always nervous with these stories. It's like, oh, the characters got duped. There's nothing they can do. Sometimes, or like, oh, they're gonna get away with this. No, immediately shut down. Wham! I like that. I thought that was fun. And then other than that, it's stock average. They break into a house, and then they fight a big evil guy. The thief character is great. 3 stars. Thief character, it's 3. It's like a solid 3, though. Diamonds from Tequila by John Walter Williams. This is a story after his book, The Fourth Wall, which you do not have to have read, because he does a very good job explaining from the character's perspective what happens. And there's a guy in a Hawaiian shirt. Because the main character is on vacation in Mexico. And it pretty much is vacation. The main character is fun. I like the main character a lot. He's the highlight of this. He's got a slightly above average, or not slightly above, he's got a big head. He's got like a condition where he's got like a freakishly large head. So that's interesting. You don't see characters with, these physical, I'm not going to say disability, but like physical traits which are not very well represented. You don't see that a lot. So that's fun. And it comes up a few times, not in a major way, but in like a character way. So, it's fun. You get to see interactions with it. And he's selfish. He's a selfish guy. He acts in his own best interest. He's an actor. He thinks like kind of like an up-and-coming on-the-rise actor would. I liked him a lot. He was the highlight, which is solid when the main character is the highlight of the story for you. The problem is it did drag. There's a murder, and at first it's a mystery, and then he kind of solves what the mystery is. But there's a lot of parts in the beginning and kind of in the middle where he's just running around talking to different people for conversations that really go nowhere, or like getting comforted because his girlfriend on paper was shot. Like it's not his real girlfriend, and he pretends to be sad, and this happens several times, and he like gets a fruit bat. It like cool. I got the point. It's not a huge gripe. It's not like it didn't take me out of it like way back in Provenance, like those dry points. This isn't dry. It's just like okay, well, you could lose a paragraph here or two, and I think it would be a much sharper story, a much tighter story. And the ending was fine. I mean, it was okay. It made sense. It made sense that it was something he would do, but it was okay. You know, it's not a 3 out of 5. It was fine. I like the main character. It's worth reading. Caravan to Nowhere by Phyllis Eisenstein. She's written other things, and she wrote with this character. Apparently, this is the first time this character has been in a new or a new story in a long, long time. It takes place in the desert. I searched up Magic Desert, and there's a guy with what looks to be very much fake huts, which I thought was very fitting. So the story was promising and under delivered. So you'll get the promise of this cool ancient city, and this character who's like chasing after this ancient city because he huffed fumes from a special powder. And that's very cool. And then the dad has to like he wants his son to take over the caravan. But how's the son gonna take over the caravan when he keeps running after this magical city, which always goes further away when you get close to it? How's that gonna resolve? And then at the end of the story, it just doesn't. His son just chases after the city and dies. And that's it. That solves that problem, I guess. I mean, I felt like it underdelivered. I felt like they could have like solved that or done more with it instead of the son. The son like double crosses his dad, who's like the leader, with like another trusted character, so that he can go and leave and chase this city like he always wanted to. And then they don't even leave you thinking, hey, maybe it's a real city and maybe he'll actually get there. No, no, no. The main character can like teleport, and he teleports towards it for like 1,000 miles and 1,000,000 miles, and he never gets to it. So that's the end of that, right? That's debunked. He just dies in the desert, sad alone. The dad just gives up on him. I don't know. The main character, like once you learn that the main character can teleport to wherever he wants, whenever he wants, and the people he's up against is some people in the desert with like daggers. I mean, right? Like and he can like teleport other people with him. I mean, come on. Like they're gonna die, and he just teleports them out of there. He saves them. He gets duped, and then his power like makes the whole thing useless, futile. So it robbed it of all tension. And then the characters were interesting. I really liked the dad and the son's dynamic, how the dad wanted to hold on to his son, but his son was crazy, and then everyone else at the camp understands this, and they're trying to support the father, and then the son just runs off and dies. So, I mean, it's 3 out of 5. It had a very interesting premise. It under-delivered, but it was okay. Until the end, it was fine. Until the end, it was pretty good. And the ending happened. I was like, eh. The Curious Affair of the Dead Wives by Lisa Tuttle. Yeah, it's a Sherlock Holmes picture I have on the right. I'm not sure if she's written other things with these characters. The main characters were fun and smart, but they weren't outstanding. It's kind of like a Sherlock Holmes Watson scenario, but Watson's actually useful. And the main character takes place from this Watson perspective. She's cool. She has agency. She solves parts of this mystery. The Sherlock Holmes character definitely is there and definitely helps. But they don't have like a one-to-one Sherlock Holmes relationship, although it is close, and they do bring up Sherlock Holmes in the story. I'm sure it's lamplighting, at least a little bit. But I mean, I'll forgive it because the dynamic between them was it was fun. I liked it. The mystery itself too was interesting. Um, a girl has gone missing, and her sister's like, "Go look after her because I saw her earlier, and they already buried her, but she's not dead, and I'm sure it was her, and she was with a different guy who threatened to kill me." So, I mean, that's a unique premise. How did this woman be buried and then be not buried, and with a different guy, and why? Um, so it's somewhat interesting. It's not super interesting. I can think of way more interesting ones, but I mean it's serviceable. And there's a there's like a solution, like though these all these women are being hypnotized by this big evil guy. You know, he's hypnotizing all these women, um, and they're being controlled. Kind of like how there's like in back when there were slaves, there's like a head slave who like controlled all the other slaves. There's like a head hypnotized woman who controlled all the other hypnotized women through um, words in Latin, which makes sense. They're not magic words. They have to be hypnotized by something in Latin. You don't expect a lot of people to know Latin, but our Sherlock Holmes character, sure enough, definitely knows Latin. So they have like a fight where they like unhypnotize, rehypnotize, unhypnotize, rehypnotize, unhypnotize, rehypnotize all these women until like the woman just kind of gives up and goes, all right, fine. If they want to go with you, then cool. If not, then they stay. Um, and that brought in an element of Stockholm syndrome too, because only the main girl, who they were investigating, wanted to leave. All the other girls wanted to stay, which is very Stockholm syndrome-y. Um, but at the same time, like I could have also puzzled out that if there's like a magic word to activate, like hypnotize and dehypnotize people, then you could probably say it. I mean, it wasn't that crazy. 3.5 stars. It was entertaining. How the Marquis got his coat back. Neil Gaiman. I went in thinking it would be bad, and I'll tell you why. Because Patrick said it sucked. Or not, it sucked, but Neil Gaiman sucked. He read American Gods, and this man hated American Gods. He hated it. With like a burning passion, he hated it. He like essentially told me to rip every copy up and eat it. And that would be a better use of it than anyone setting eyes upon it. And I was like, oh wow, this guy hates Neil Gaiman. Clearly he's not a good writer. And I read a little bit of Good Omens, which he wrote with one of my favorite authors, Tara Pratchett, and I did not like it as much. Which I was like, oh, clearly Neil Gaiman is just a bad author. So that's what I went in thinking. But I mean, the world is so wonderful. It's filled with a bunch of different characters. There's like a all-controlling mushroom, which when you eat its spores, you become kind of like a mushroom gremlin, kind of, and it controls your thoughts like a parasite, but not too much, just mostly. And it makes you feel like you're one with a community. It takes away a lot of your individuality, but also leaves some. I'm not sure if that's talking about government in some capacity. I didn't think too hard about it, but it's cool. And then there's like elephant people, which in itself is not very cool. But then there's the shepherds, who hypnotize people and make them do labor for them, and then they lead them, and then all these people want to be part of the flock. They want to be part of the flock. So it's like hypnotized labor, and then when one of them dies, they get shoveled into the pit by the others, and do. Cool. That's a neat concept, to just have these people in a setting that, oh, you gotta be on your toes. Then the protagonist is refreshingly unprepared. Like, he loses his coat, and it makes him lose a lot of his confidence. This comes after, I think, the first book in this series, which I didn't read. I got, like, enough of a feel for the character. I think it probably would have helped to have read the first one. I don't think it's a necessity, but I think it definitely helped. Like, the man loses a lot of confidence once his coat gets taken away, and you can really see how much this coat means to him, especially because he didn't have a name. He gave himself his own name, and so he created his own persona in his mind. Clearly, this coat is definitely a part of this persona, and without this coat, he's like naked. He's not confident. He's making mistakes that normally he wouldn't. It's very interesting to see how confidence and identity and character can really mesh together in that way. And he gets caught off guard by so many things so often. His older brother has to save him twice. Yeah, twice. And then on the third time he saves his older brother using like something that's set up previously. I'm not going to spoil this too because it's also worth reading. But refreshingly, he doesn't know what the fuck's going on a lot of the time. He just has a goal in mind. And then there's a big ending dilemma. Like they're like stuck. They're stuck in a hole. And then he gets out of it using clever. It's foreshadowed and using critical thinking, and I'm sure the audience or like the reader could critical think it as well. Like, it becomes obvious in hindsight, which is one of the smart solutions, right? It's obvious in hindsight, but up until then, you're like they have no way out. So it's very interesting. 4 to 5. Patrick, you don't know what you're talking about. Read something other than Redfish Bluefish by Dr. Seuss every once in a while. Now showing by Connie Willis. She's written other things, and she was like a big name coming into this. So I knew that I should expect big things from this author. Her name is on like the include stories by tag at the start of the book, so I was very excited. And on the right, I've got companies that Disney owns because I will get into that. It's a crime against people who read. The story sucks. It is genuinely one of the worst stories I've ever read in my life. Maybe the worst. It's if you like reading, stay away. Like the whole thing feels like an excuse for the author to say brand names and go, "Hey, do you know this? I know this. Did you know that? I know that. I watched movies. I'm hip and I'm in pop culture. Marvel, Mickey Mouse, Iron Man, old movies from the 70s, Bruce Willis. I know these things." It takes place in like a big mall, and there's a big conspiracy that, and then her ex-boyfriend who she's broken up with, and she doesn't like scoundrels, and this man is most certainly he's an asshole, not a scoundrel. He's not endearing, but very clearly she still likes this guy. And there's this big conspiracy. Does he tell her anything? No. He doesn't tell her a goddamn thing that would make her cooperate until like the literal last minute. It's so frustrating. It's as a reader, it's so frustrating. On to my next point. It's a crime against people who read. The main character, unstomachable, like unbearable. She's such an asshole and a moron. Like, oh, I don't like this guy. It's very obvious to everyone. I guess it's supposed to be endearing that she's like, I don't like this guy. He's not cool. But she actually does like him. But to me, it was so frustrating. Like, his name is Jack. Like, it's so bad. It's so bad. Like, there's a fun little thing like, sometimes movies aren't made till after the fact, and they have like these big superdomes of movies, and they try to delay you to stop you from watching the movies that they aren't out yet because they have a bunch of filler movies which they made up, and everyone's only ever gonna watch Black Panther and Ant-Man anyway. So why even release other movies? People just want the illusion of choice. It's like if Netflix, all those garbage movies, or Amazon Prime just has a bunch of garbage movies on it, which nobody but me and Patrick and Alex ever watch. So who would even know? They're just bumping up their numbers. So that in itself is sort of cool, but the way that this Jack character goes about solving this mystery and crime sucks. The way these two characters interact sucks. Jack is portrayed as this all-knowing god. He knows everything. And they mention specifically how hot he is, like 6 times. Not even the girl who's in love with him. Other characters mention how scorching hot this character is. It feels to me like the author is just talking about a guy she wants to date, who's really into old movies and is also the coolest man in history. It I hate it. He's cool. He loves all the niche things that this woman loves. He's also turns out there was intrigue to his character because he got expelled from school for pranking the dean, but he says it wasn't like that because it was for something else. Will he elaborate? No, he never says specifically why in the story, and you have to find out right at the end that oh, he was right. It was for a bigger thing. Also, he says he graduated from Yale, which he did. It's confirmed he did graduate from Yale. So he didn't even like flunk. He's still like has a degree. He's like anti-corruption. That's his job. He's not like a man with a passion, which I thought was at least somewhat interesting, with a passion for old movies. No, no, no. Anti-fraud is his job. So he's risked nothing. Oh, it's so annoying. Oh, I hate it. On to my last point. It's a crime against people who read. It sucks, and I hate it, and it's bad. Never read this. The only reason I'm giving it half a star is I did not shoot John Lennon after reading it. Or myself, or anyone else. The only redeeming quality is I did not kill someone shortly after reading it. Horrible. If my rating system went down to like 0.1 or like 0.00, I would. I'm not gonna rate it 0 stars because again, I didn't kill someone. But man, is it hugging the edge there? Horrible. On the other hand, this is great. The Lightning Tree by Patrick Rothfuss. I love The Name of the Wind. One of my favorite books. But I'll get to the side quest Skyrims later. It's 4 stars. That fucked up. But, you know, the prose is fantastic. It's majestic. Patrick Rothfuss could write a cookbook, and I would eat it up. The man knows how to write. And it's, I'm sure in part, at least due to the fact that he's like a serial editor and he goes through every line of dialogue until it's perfect. But, his words fly out. I love the way he writes. It adds a lot of depth to Bast, beyond The Name of the Wind. It's like you get to see a day in his life and what he does, and it's cool because in the main books, you don't see much. It takes place as a short story in the world of The Name of the Wind before the books happen, so you get to see what this character does in a day in his life. And that's cool. It gives him a little bit of characterization. Very cool characterization. And there's a lot of cool things here again, like Bast trades favors and lies that he comes up with, and a bunch of different things and rituals for secrets and small favors, which is very kind of childish, but also Bast is like a fae man, so it makes sense. And he only deals with children, and he doesn't deal with adults, so it's very interesting that he doesn't like adults, like at all. So it adds a lot of depth to him. But it feels like just a bunch of fun side quests. Like, if I'm being honest with you, there's no overarching story. There's no, like, narrative that's being portrayed. It really is just a day in the life of one of the characters of The Name of the Wind. And I like that, but I mean, if you haven't read The Name of the Wind, I'm not sure that you're going to like this short story. Because it's just a character who you don't know, going around a town you don't know, interacting with different characters you don't know. And I mean, Patrick Rothfuss writes brilliantly, and there's a lot of interesting ideas in it. But are you going to care? Are you going to read 60 pages of it? I don't know if you would. I loved it, but I'm not sure if I didn't read Name of the Wind, if I'd like it nearly as much. And then the final one, The Rogue Prince or A King's Brother by George R.R. Martin. I've never read Martin before. for this. And hey, maybe now I will. It felt like a good history lecture. Like the way he writes it, it's like it's a historian recounting events. So you never get characters' thoughts. You never get stakes. You never get dialogue. You get somebody telling you what happened in what year when. In an interesting way, mind you, right? Like, this is a very good history teacher, but it's still a history professor lecturing on the board about history. So it's, it can be a con. All the characters, though, are unique and interesting, if you can keep track of them, because there's a lot of them, and some of them show up for about 3 seconds, and their only purpose is to establish that somebody else is in a family, and they don't do much. I managed somehow to keep track of all the characters. I had a little bit of trouble with it. I would not be surprised if other people had trouble with it. But the characters themselves, their actions are very interesting, and they've got strong characters, right? Even though you can't hear them say anything or think anything, their actions speak way louder than the words could. I'm so clever and intelligent. I'm the first person to ever come up with that thought. But their actions speak very loudly and create very strong characterizations for each of these characters. So I thought that was cool. And then it does feel a little impersonal, right, with this whole history aspect thing. I didn't think it was that huge of a deal, but in my opinion, it also holds it back a little bit. Without that, the story doesn't happen. It takes place over too many years. It would not be a short story without that. But you do kind of get robbed of attachment. 3.5 stars, solid. I liked it. I thought the characters were interesting. Good. And then the final one, overall rating. I've calculated it and divided it. 3.14. So, hello, if you skipped all the way to the end, could be a good choice. Read the ones that are 3 or above. 3.5 or above, even better. Skip everything under it, pretty much. If you read Now Showing, call me, I will go comfort you for what your eyes have just witnessed. But hey, there's some 5s in here. There's only one 1. There's only one 0.5. There's 2 5s. The 4.5 and a bunch of 4s. Pretty good. Honestly, I enjoyed this. Started in September, finished in first week of December. Took me about 3 months. September, October, November, December. 4 months. Took me about 4 months to read this, and that's reading 20-ish minutes a day, 20-30 minutes every 20-30 minutes every third day. I read Monday, Wednesday, Friday, sometimes on Thursday. So it's doable. The book is how many pages here? 909 pages long. So it's definitely doable, especially if you only read the good ones, which is why I'm here. Let me know if you want me to do this again. If not, I understand. Not a lot of people read nowadays, but I thought this would be a fun idea because I just finished the book. So, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. It is 3 a.m. Goodbye!
Have you ever felt this heartache? Thought that there would be some